Okay. Can you describe your role in the American Advertising Federation and how that impacts clubs across the nation?
Well, I'm the Chief Government Affairs Advocate for the AAF, so I am representing our members on Capitol Hill and in state legislatures and sometimes in city councils. Although the nature of the AAF as a very broad-based grassroots organization, my job is as much to enable and empower our members to represent themselves as it is for me to represent them. Politicians care much more about what their constituents have to say about an issue as opposed to what the Washington lobbyist has to say about the issue. So I have the ability, I hope, with the arguments and the data that we have on the various issues to change a politician's mind, but changing their votes depends much more on the attitudes of the constituents and the folks back home and the people that he's representing or she's representing.
Okay. And why do you feel it's important for people and companies in the advertising industry to be members of the American Advertising Federation?
Well, advertising, we talk about the advertising industry, but it's really the advertising industries. It's plural. Mm-hmm. There are the clients, there are the agencies, there's the media, the suppliers, and whatnot. And AAF is really the only national association or local association that gives all parts of the industry a chance to come together and work together. So just from a business standpoint, it's great for members to come in because it's a chance to network and get to know people from different parts of the industry, make the connections that help them advance their own business. But from an advocacy point of view, it's helpful because we are able to show the lawmakers that this is a broad-based industry. There are a lot of people that care about the issues.
Can you tell us about Advertising Action Day on the Hill?
That is a one-day conference that we're putting on April the 17th, where our goal is to demonstrate the power and the breadth of the AAF grassroots. We're going to have a morning conference where we'll have speakers from up on Capitol Hill. Lee Terry, who chairs the subcommittee with jurisdiction over most advertising issues, will be speaking. And Edith Ramirez, who is President Obama just announced will be the new chairman of the FTC, will be speaking to the group as well. And we'll have some other folks who come in. And we'll talk about the issues and the important things that are going on in Washington, D.C. that directly affect advertising. And then in the afternoon, we're going to have the people go on up to the Hill, get the boots on the ground, and actually talk to their representatives and let them know that the advertising industry cares enough to come to Washington, D.C. to learn about these things and to visit with the lawmakers that are making the decisions and educate them about our industry and what we're doing.
Okay. And what are some of the top issues towards that most concern the industry right now?
Well, the biggest issue that cuts across the broad swath of our membership is always taxes. Whether it's on the federal level, maintaining the full federal tax deduction for advertising expenses, or at the state level, proposals to extend the sales tax to advertising. And we have seen both of those issues arise now in Congress as they talk about tax reform, possibly lowering the tax rate or eliminating deductions and preferences. There are a number of members of Congress who think that advertising is one of those things that should be looked at and possibly the full deduction reduced. Now, advertising, we would argue, is something that is not a preference. It's not a tax break. It's a normal and very necessary method for all businesses to communicate with their consumers. And so it's something that it's essential to business, just as having a place, an office to do your business, or employees. Communicating with your members or consumers is something that's it hits the bottom line of any business.
Okay. And so what can local clubs and our member companies be doing to help the American Advertising Federation protect the industry or industries?
Well, what they need to do is get involved, be aware of the issues, and when something arises, be willing to stand up and speak. I mentioned earlier that that a big issue is sales taxes, extending the service tax to sales. And in Ohio right now and Minnesota, the governors of both of those states have proposed just that. What they would like to do is lower their sales tax rate but broaden the base to include many, many services, and they have both included advertising on the list of those services that they would like to tax. And again, that's just going to be counterproductive, because you tax advertising, it's going to reduce the amount of advertising, which ultimately reduces the amount of sales. And it reduces the amount of sales tax that's there. So local members need to get involved and speak up. And they've been doing that in both states. We have had people calling into their local representatives telling them that this is not something that they think is smart to be done. We have had people go in and to testify at the hearings when they talk about this, to talk about the economic impact of advertising and the negative impact of taxing it.
Okay. And so what resources does the American Advertising Federation have available to clubs and its members, especially in regards to these issues?
Right. Well, first and foremost, I'm a resource. I'm there for the members, and I will help guide them along the way. We can use the experience from other states. Other times issues have come up. We know the types of arguments that work. We know how to approach legislators and give them the arguments, the experience of other states. In 1987, Florida actually passed an advertising tax, and for 6 months taxed advertising and other services, and it was such a disaster in terms of lost revenue for the state and for the media, for the advertising business, that they repealed it after 6 months.
Oh, wow.
So we have a lot of arguments there. We have done economic studies done by Nobel laureates that show the economic impact of advertising, not just across the United States, but in every state and in every congressional district. So we can show that in Kentucky, for instance, advertising directly supports just under 300,000 jobs. It's about 15% of the jobs within the state are supported through advertising. 20% of the economic activity of the state comes through advertising. So that's something that's very, very powerful, and something that legislators really don't want to mess with, because if you start taxing advertising, the ripple effects come down through all of that. It will cost jobs, it will cost sales, and it will ultimately reduce tax revenues rather than increase it.
Okay. And so what resources, if any, do you feel are being underutilized by members?
Well, in some ways, the resource that's underutilized most is the members. Government relations is one of those things that I've found over my years here. If there's an issue that comes up, our members are very, very quick to respond. They're terrific in standing up and communicating with their lawmakers the importance of those things. But when there's nothing going on, those are really the times when you want to do some of that education. You don't just want to go to a lawmaker when there's a problem and say, "Oh my gosh, you got to save me," and you're just somebody coming in off the street. You want to develop those relationships beforehand. The best issue is the one that doesn't happen. The ad tax that is never proposed is the best victory. It's not as dramatic as winning a floor vote or something like that. But the nature of this business is, the lobbying business is, when we're not out advocating for a lot of bills to be passed, we're advocating essentially to be left alone, to let us do our business to help drive the economy. So when nothing is happening up on the Hill or in the state capitol, that's usually when things are best. But that's the time also for us to develop the relationships with the lawmakers and get to know them and educate them about the advertising industry.
Okay. And can you give an example of legislation or a government issue that was stopped or redrafted through an effort, either a joint effort or a local effort? I know you had mentioned the Florida.
Well, right, back in Florida in '87, where it actually passed and then was repealed. But since then, there have been approximately 40 or so states that in one form or another have proposed taxing advertising, whether it's just at the discussion phase or whether they're actually bills that are introduced and they've gotten to hearings or votes. And we have been very successful working with our members in convincing all those legislatures to this point that taxing advertising is not something that they want to do, that ultimately when they looked at it they realized that it's not the solution that initially they thought it was, that it's something that's going to harm.
Okay. And you have previous experience in politics working as a legislative assistant. How has that experience and exposure helped you in dealing with your role with the American Advertising Federation?
Well, it's always good to know and appreciate what the perspective of the other side. Mm-hmm. Sun Tzu in The Art of War said you want to know your enemy's position as well as your own. Mm-hmm. We're not enemies. We're trying to work together with them, but the lawmakers come at it from a different perspective. And so knowing the mindset of what they're trying to do always helps. And it also knowing how much they value the opinions of their constituents. I remember very much one of my first jobs working up on the Hill was answering mail from constituents, and anytime an issue would come up on the Hill, a vote where our member hadn't staked out a strong position beforehand as he was researching it, one of the first questions he always asked was, well, what do we hear from the people back in the district? Does anybody care about that there? Mm-hmm. And that really struck home, and that gets back into the importance of the AAF grassroots, because they are the people back in the district. So we need to make sure that those lawmakers know that, yes, we do care.
Okay. And as you said, with a grassroots network of over 40,000 advertising professionals, what is the best or most effective way that a member can raise awareness about their concerns or issues in regards to what is happening in their government?
Well, there are a number of different ways, and there are a number of different places to raise concerns. Again, AAF has a number of different resources. We have an email newsletter mm-hmm. that we put out on the various issues, and so the club can distribute that to all of their members so that the local industry is aware of the different types of things that are going on. So there's a sensitivity to that should it come up within your state, or if you have a member of Congress who sits on one of the committees that is dealing with that issue. But the other way for members to raise awareness is to write letters, to make calls, mm-hmm. to make the contacts with the lawmakers. What I have found over the course of the years is that our industry tends to be very, very well connected, that within any given advertising club you're going to find folks that know a member of the state legislature or know the member of Congress. They've got kids that have played on their t-ball teams together or go to school together or they mm-hmm. go to the same church. And so those contacts are out there, and it's a matter of our utilizing them.
So are there any other issues aside from the tax issue that you feel that members should be aware of or that would also need to be addressed?
There are a few of them, yes. There are privacy issues. Online behavioral advertising, as advertisers are able to provide consumers when they're online mm-hmm. with advertising that is more in line with their interests. It's much more valuable to consumers to be able to get advertising for things that they care about, but it raises concerns. There are a number of advocates who feel like it can be crossing a line mm-hmm. in terms of knowing about a consumer's interest. Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of these things are able to be done on an anonymous basis, and we're working on increasing that as well. But we also have a self-regulatory system, the Digital Advertising Alliance, which allows consumers the opportunity not to receive that advertising. Mm-hmm. If they think it's their privacy concerns and they don't want to participate, they have that opportunity. And we want to make sure that consumers are comfortable with the advertising, that they can trust the advertising. So self-regulation is very important, not just there, but for traditional media advertising as well. The advertising industry has one of the best self-regulatory programs in the country, and advertising regulators such as the FTC mm-hmm. have acknowledged that as well. And plus there are other First Amendment issues. Anytime there's a product or a service that some lawmaker doesn't like, they tend to go after the advertising. Childhood obesity is something that's a big concern, and many lawmakers have felt like, well, gosh, maybe what we ought to do is try and restrict the advertising to kids to try and address that. Again, that's an area where the food industry has, through a self-regulatory program, already cut back on a lot of the types of products they're advertising and the audiences they're advertising to. And interestingly enough, over the last few years, as the obesity levels have increased, that's happened at the same time that exposure to advertising has decreased. So that it seems obvious there's not really a nexus there, but there is a shoot the messenger mentality because advertising tends to be out there and visible. So we have, for as long as I have been at AAF, First Amendment issues have been paramount. And the right to legally advertise, truthfully advertise products to legal audiences is paramount.
Okay, well, thank you for your time, and we're glad to have you here.
It's my pleasure. I appreciate the